What would you think if I told you that some of the world's greatest minds, men crowned as intellectual giants, spent their lives running from the very thing they claim to seek? Truth, depth, mystery. Carl Jung saw this, and he did not admire it. He despised it. Not because he hated philosophy itself, but because he understood its shadow. Jung saw too many philosophers clinging to logic as a fortress, using reason as a shield against the wild, untamed forces of the unconscious, against chaos, against the feminine unknown. Most men are terrified of what they cannot control, and nothing is less controllable than the depths of the feminine psyche. Not woman in the superficial sense, but woman as archetype, the carrier of life and death, seduction and silence, creation and destruction. She is the symbol of mystery itself, and mystery offends the ego of a man who believes he should have all the answers. So he builds walls of theory. He writes volumes of abstract thought. He intellectualizes love, death, desire, even God. But in doing so, he turns away from the living waters of experience. He becomes sterile. Jung called this spiritual cowardice, and it's why he distrusted the philosopher who fears the feminine, because that fear is not just personal, it is cultural, collective, systemic. Men who refuse to face the unknown become obsessed with control. They create rules, ideologies, hierarchies. They dissect life into manageable parts, but they avoid the dark forests of feeling, of eros, of soul. They run from the spaces where logic cannot save them. And here's the tragedy. The more a man avoids the feminine unknown, the more it haunts him. This is why he obsesses over the woman who does not explain herself, the woman who leaves his text on read, the woman who smiles with mystery in her eyes and then disappears for weeks without offering closure. She becomes an enigma he cannot solve, and that is precisely why he cannot forget her. Her silence activates something primal in him, his shadow. Jung taught that the shadow is everything we deny, suppress, or refuse to confront. For most men, the shadow is feminine, not because of gender, but because the unconscious itself is feminine in nature. It is receptive, vast, symbolic, irrational, and emotional. It does not speak in words, but in images, dreams, and intuitive whispers. When a man fears the feminine unknown, he fears his own depths. He fears his vulnerability, his longing, his hunger for connection beyond domination. He fears the soft places in himself, the wounds he refuses to heal, the desires he pretends not to have. So he obsesses, not because he wants to understand the woman, but because he wants to control the discomfort she creates in him. The woman who chooses herself triggers this discomfort more than any other. She is not afraid of her own depths, so she will not shrink to fit inside his logical framework. She will not perform emotional labor to help him avoid his shadow. She will not make herself small just to keep his ego safe. And this is why men chase her in desperation after she walks away. She represents the parts of themselves they cannot integrate. They do not want her body. They want to possess her mystery. But mystery cannot be possessed. It can only be surrendered to. This is the lesson philosophers fear. The great minds of history who never looked inward, who wrote endless treatises on morality, existence, and virtue, but avoided the mirror, avoided the dark night of the soul, avoided the raw, terrifying process of individuation, where the ego is shattered and the true self is born. Jung saw this pattern everywhere, men preferring intellect over intimacy, abstraction over embodiment, theory over transformation. And he knew the cost. A life wasted in avoidance, a mind sharpened but a soul untouched, a man surrounded by accolades, yet lonely in his core, because he never dared to kneel at the altar of the unknown and let it unmake him. This is why Carl Jung warned against the philosopher's trap. The philosopher who fears the feminine does not become wise. He becomes trapped in his own defenses. And if you are honest with yourself, you'll see this pattern in the men around you. Maybe you'll see it in yourself. Have you chosen safety over growth? Have you intellectualized your pain rather than feeling it? Have you analyzed love instead of living it? If so, you are not alone. But the longer you stay there, the more haunted you will become by the woman who refuses to be an emotional caretaker for your avoidance. She will choose her own path, and you will either obsess over her or follow her example and choose your own. There is a moment in every man's life when he must decide. Will he remain a prisoner of his own intellect, or will he step into the wilderness of his soul? Carl Jung knew this wilderness intimately. He called it the individuation process, the journey beyond persona, beyond social masks, beyond the rational mind's comfort zone. It is the path of integrating the shadow, not repressing it. But to do this, a man must face what terrifies him most, the unpredictable, untamable nature of the feminine psyche, both in the women he desires and within his own unconscious. This is why Jung despised the philosopher who reduced life to logic. He saw in them a brittle masculinity, men who constructed towers of thought to escape the oceanic depth of feeling, men who could quote Socrates but could not sit with their own heartbreak, men who debated virtue yet recoiled from vulnerability, men who obsessed over metaphysics while their personal lives rotted in emotional neglect. He knew the consequences of this imbalance. When the intellect dominates and the soul is ignored, obsession festers in the shadows. The woman who chooses her own path becomes the ultimate trigger for this imbalance. She evokes the unknown. She becomes, in his mind, the portal to something he cannot access directly, his anima, the feminine energy within his own psyche. But rather than integrate this part of himself, he projects it outward onto her. He becomes fixated on the external woman because he cannot meet the inner one. This is why she haunts him after she leaves. She is no longer just a person. She becomes a symbol, a living embodiment of his own spiritual deficit. Her detachment becomes a mirror of his disconnection from life itself. She is not rejecting him as a man. She is rejecting his refusal to evolve, and that he cannot bear. Most men in this position do not choose growth. They choose fixation. They analyze her every move, every word, every silence. They seek closure, but not from a place of maturity, from a place of wounded ego. They want her to explain her mystery so they can file it away into a category, reduce her to something knowable, predictable, safe. But the feminine unknown cannot be explained. It is meant to be experienced. Jung wrote that the meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow. For the man who fears the feminine, the woman who walks away becomes that shadow. She triggers his confrontation with everything he has avoided: emotional hunger, fear of rejection, the ache of mortality, the terror of insignificance. This is why philosophers have feared the feminine since ancient times. The Greeks warned of sirens and enchantresses. The medieval mystics wrote of dangerous women who led men astray. But the truth is simpler. These women symbolize life beyond the mind, life that cannot be controlled, life that demands humility. The woman who chooses her own path becomes a living reminder that no amount of intellectual mastery will substitute for soul work. And yet, this woman is not the enemy, she is the invitation. She invites the man to stop chasing answers and start embracing questions. She invites him to leave the safety of the lecture hall and enter the unpredictable terrain of his own heart. She asks him to feel what he fears, to sit with longing, uncertainty, desire, grief, without running to the comfort of analysis. Most men will resist this. They will resent her for forcing this confrontation. They will label her difficult, cold, or crazy. But in truth, she is none of these things. She is simply unwilling to play a role in his avoidance pattern. She will not mother his ego. She will not make herself small to soothe his fears. She will not water down her complexity to fit into his need for clarity. And so she walks away. Her departure is not cruelty. It is initiation. It forces the man to ask, who am I without the chase? Who am I when I stop intellectualizing desire and start feeling it? Who am I beyond the walls of thought? This is the question Jung wanted men to ask, not just philosophers, but all men trapped in the prison of mind over soul. If you're listening to this now, you must ask yourself, have you become addicted to the safety of logic? Are you clinging to the known because you are terrified of the unknown? If the answer is yes, then understand this. Obsession is not love. Control is not connection. Understanding is not the same as intimacy. The woman who walks away from you may actually be the first woman who has truly loved you, because she is the first one to refuse to collude with your stagnation. And now the choice is yours. Will you chase her endlessly, or will you stop running from yourself? The man who chases the woman who walks away is often not chasing her at all. He is chasing his own disowned longing, the part of himself he has buried beneath years of intellect, control, and fear. Carl Jung warned that when a man refuses to face the depths of his unconscious, those depths do not disappear. They gather in the shadows. They transform into projection, obsession, addiction, and nowhere is this more obvious than in his relationship with the feminine. She becomes to him both salvation and threat, the unattainable goddess and the cruel destroyer. He places her on a pedestal, worshiping her mystery, yet resenting her autonomy. He wants her to reveal herself, but he punishes her when she does not. He says he loves her, but in truth, he loves the way she mirrors his inner world, a world he is too afraid to confront directly. Jung understood this dynamic. He saw it play out not just in romantic love, but in the entire masculine psyche. The fear of the feminine is the fear of chaos, of feeling, of losing control. The philosopher builds systems to avoid it. The religious man creates doctrines to suppress it. The academic analyzes it from a distance. But the woman who walks away dismantles all of that. She is not interested in playing the role of muse or object. She will not become a concept in his intellectual exercise. She embodies what the mind cannot grasp, the living, breathing, unknown. And when she chooses herself, she breaks his illusion of ownership. She reminds him that no matter how smart he is, he cannot control life. This triggers a crisis. For the man who has spent his life avoiding the feminine unknown, her departure feels like annihilation. It is not just the loss of a relationship. It is the collapse of his constructed world. She was the symbol of his inner mystery, and now she is gone. And he is left with the unbearable reality. He has no access to his own soul. So what does he do? Most often, he seeks to replace her. He finds another woman, hoping to replicate the dynamic. But the pattern repeats. Each time he avoids his own shadow, he projects it outward. He blames her for being too distant, too emotional, too silent, too free. But in truth, it is his own distance, his own emotional suppression, his own silence, his own fear of freedom. The philosophers Jung criticized were guilty of this on a grand scale. They created entire systems of thought that excluded the feminine principle. They worshipped logos, reason, structure, clarity, while dismissing eros, the life force, the irrational, the wild. They feared the unpredictable aspects of human nature and tried to domesticate them with language. But life will not be domesticated, and neither will a woman who knows her worth. She will not stay to make him comfortable. She will not explain her mystery so he can feel in control. She will not apologize for being what she is, a symbol of life itself, complex, shifting, unknowable. Jung believed that until a man integrates his anima, his inner feminine, he will remain trapped in this loop. He will chase women not because he loves them, but because he is trying to recover lost pieces of himself. But the more he tries to possess the feminine outside of himself, the more lost he becomes. True integration requires surrender. It requires the courage to stop chasing and start descending into his own soul, his own wounds, his own longing. He must meet the places in himself he has ignored. He must feel what he has numbed. He must allow the unknown to teach him rather than try to master it. This is not an easy path. It is not for the ordinary man. It is not for the man who wants a neat, logical life. It is for the man who is willing to be undone and remade. Jung called this process transformation. It is the death of the false self and the birth of the true one. And it cannot happen until the man stops projecting the feminine onto women and starts honoring it within himself. The woman who chooses her own path forces this choice. She is not a punishment. She is a catalyst. Her absence is an invitation. Will he take it? Or will he remain in the prison of obsession, chasing the ghost of a woman who refuses to be reduced to his intellectual safety net? If you are hearing this now, ask yourself honestly, are you chasing her? Or are you running from yourself? There comes a moment when the man who chases must sit in silence with his own emptiness. No more strategies, no more texts sent into the void, no more decoding of her silence. Only the raw encounter with himself. This is the moment of shadow work Carl Jung described. The collapse of the outer chase is the beginning of the inner one. The question is no longer, how do I get her back? But why was I so terrified of losing her in the first place? For most men, the answer is simple but unbearable. Because she carried the mystery he refused to carry himself. The woman who chooses herself, who walks away, who embodies the feminine unknown, activates in the man a primal ache for his own lost soul. She becomes the forbidden door to the parts of life he has avoided: uncertainty, surrender, emotional depth, grief, erotic complexity, love without possession. And make no mistake, this ache is dangerous. When a man represses it, it turns dark. He becomes bitter, cynical, obsessed. He calls her selfish. He claims she is cold, manipulative, cruel. He rewrites the story so he can remain the victim of her autonomy rather than the student of his own shadow. Jung warned that the disowned feminine becomes a demon in the male psyche. She appears in nightmares as the devouring mother, the siren, the temptress who lures him to his downfall. But these are only projections of his own fear, the fear of surrendering to something larger than his ego. This fear is not new, it is ancient. Entire civilizations have built themselves on the repression of the feminine. Patriarchal religions silenced female mystics. Philosophers dismissed intuitive knowing. Stoic ideals, when misunderstood, taught men to suppress their emotions rather than master them. But Jung knew the truth. What is repressed does not disappear. It festers. The woman who walks away carries this ancestral wound. She is not just herself. She is every feminine force that patriarchal consciousness has tried to control. She is every mystery that has been silenced, every wild thing that has been tamed, every deep feeling that has been ignored. When she chooses her own path, she awakens this history in the man. And unless he is ready to face it, he will either chase her desperately or demonize her ruthlessly. Both responses are a refusal to do the work. What is the work? It is not about getting her back. It is about becoming whole. To stop wasting his life, a man must stop running from the unknown and start integrating it. He must look into the mirror of her silence and see his own unhealed wounds, his terror of rejection, his fear of insignificance, his discomfort with emotional chaos, his addiction to control. He must sit in this discomfort without flinching, without numbing it with another conquest, another theory, another intellectual escape. He must learn to listen to his own soul the way he wanted her to listen to him. He must stop treating women as vessels for his unmet needs and start becoming the vessel himself, capable of holding grief, joy, love, loss, and the infinite ambiguity of existence. This is the path of individuation, the true masculine initiation, and it cannot happen while he is still clinging to the ego's need for dominance. He cannot master the feminine. He can only bow to it, not in subservience, but in reverence. To face the feminine unknown is to face life itself. It is to admit that logic will not save him from death, that no philosophy will prevent heartbreak, that no amount of intellectual achievement will fill the void left by a soul unclaimed. The woman who leaves, who refuses to explain herself, who chooses her own path is not the problem. She is the portal. She forces the man to ask, will I become bitter or will I become better? Will I obsess over her or will I integrate what she represents? Will I remain trapped in cycles of pursuit and rejection or will I break the pattern forever? Most men will not choose transformation. They will blame her. They will call her too much, too distant, too complicated. They will try to replace her with someone simpler, someone more compliant, someone who will play the game. But the wise man will choose the harder path, the descent into his own unconscious. He will stop asking, why did she leave? And start asking, what part of me am I still running from? And when he answers that question, the chase will end. Not because he has given up, but because he has awakened. The awakened man no longer views the woman who walks away as a source of torment. He sees her as the mirror he was once too afraid to face. Her absence taught him the lesson her presence could not, that wholeness does not come from possession, but from inner integration. Carl Jung knew this was the deepest work of all, not to analyze the other, but to reconcile with the self, to stop projecting shadow material onto women and begin the painful excavation of the unclaimed feminine within. This is not softness in the way the world defines it. It is ferocity, but directed inward. The courage to stand naked before one's own unconscious and say, I see you now. The ordinary man will never choose this path. He will remain stuck in cycles of conquest and collapse, longing and loathing, obsession and avoidance. He will keep asking, why did she leave me? Rather than, what truth did her leaving reveal? But the man who chooses transformation understands the secret. The woman did not leave him. She liberated him from his own delusion. Her departure stripped away his comfort. It dismantled his illusion of control. It forced him to confront the feminine principle as it truly is. Not something to be owned, but something to be honored. Not something external, but something alive within his own psyche, waiting to be integrated. The Stoics taught this in their own way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Her leaving was an outside event. His reaction, his growth, his individuation, that is the domain of his inner mastery. This is why Jung did not truly hate philosophers. He hated what philosophy becomes when it is used to escape the soul, when it becomes a fortress of thought to protect a man from his own emotions, his own fears, his own shadow. He hated when philosophy became an excuse for spiritual laziness. The man who integrates both logos and eros, the rational and the irrational, the masculine and the feminine, transcends this trap. He stops living in his head and starts living from his center. He becomes neither predator nor victim in love. He no longer fears the woman who walks away, nor does he resent her. He understands her choice because he has chosen himself. In this state, desire transforms. It is no longer hunger for the other. It is the magnetic pull toward wholeness. Love becomes an offering, not a transaction. Connection becomes sacred, not strategic. Presence replaces performance. The woman who knows her worth feels this shift. She senses when a man approaches her not out of need, but from fullness. She knows when he sees her clearly, without projection. She knows when he has done his shadow work. Not perfectly, not completely, but with honesty. And in this knowing, she may return, or she may not. But either way, the man no longer chases. Because the chase was never about her. It was about avoiding the mirror she held up to his soul. And now he sees. He sees that life is not about controlling the unknown, but dancing with it. That love is not about grasping, but witnessing. That desire is not about filling a void, but about becoming spacious enough to hold mystery without collapsing. This is individuation. The marriage of the inner masculine and the inner feminine. The true alchemy of the soul. And so, the story ends not with reunion, but with release. The man stands alone, but not lonely. He is whole not because he possesses the woman, but because he possesses himself. Her absence became his awakening. Her silence taught him to listen to his own depths. Her departure forced him to confront the parts of himself he had disowned for too long. This is why Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The woman who knows her worth walks away because she will not dim her light for a man trapped in his own denial. She refuses to be the emotional laborer for his ego. She refuses to be the placeholder for his anima. She chooses her own path because she understands her role is not to save him, but to be herself. And the man who truly evolves does not resent her for this. He thanks her, because she forced him to stop wasting his life. She forced him to meet his own soul. And now he knows. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.